programming, we will make sure that we will able to understand about all the things in the real life. Like we are able to find out preparing the mathematical models of the problem. And by using these models, are we able to find out the solutions by using different methods. So first outcome is that we can able to translate the real life problem. And second important learning outcome by using the learning linear programming is we are able to take the decision variables. We are able to find out what are the different variables which is to be considered when the linear programming topic is to be considered. We are able to find out the objective function, like what is my objective of dealing with the linear programming. Basically, two objectives are there. First one is you're maximizing your profit, and the last one is you're minimizing your cost. And yes, when we are dealing about the linear programming, there are different types of constraints. Like we have the related constraints related to labor, we have the constraint related to the machine hours, timing, we have the constraint limited to the resources. So we have to consider all these values. With the help of linear programming, we not only able to understand the mathematical formulation of your problems, but also we will able to find out the optimization methods and how these methods are to be applied in the real world scenario. Next most important thing in this, we will learn about using the most important method, that's the simplex method, and the interior point method that will help you in getting the solutions of the linear programming. If I'm talking about the practical approach, you able to find out your limited resource to be used up in an effective and efficient manner. And finally, you able to optimize the use of the resources to according to your specific goals. Again, the goals will be again the same way, that's maximization of profit or minimization of your cost. You are able to take the decisions. Your quantitative technique, that's whether you are playing with the quantitative qualities, numbers. So you are able to take the decision while using this numbers, right? Your outcomes has been come in a systematic way. Like on the systematically, you are able to evaluate the different scenarios. And the most important thing, your problem solving skills will be improved with the help of the linear programming. And you are able to use which type of approaches, you are able to use the structural approaches when you are dealing with the linear programming. And the most important and the last important thing, there's you able to solve the complex problem in a very manageable path. But how this will come up by step, we're dealing about all these things in a proper way. First, if I am talking about the linear programming, this concept, if I'm talking about this concept, this is one of the most popular method. Yes, we use this method very much. Like this is the most important method and the popular method for solving your problem linear problems. And what is it? It is that basically we can use this word iterative problem. We have to get the iterative process. That is a very iterative process to get your feasible optimum solution. In this method, basically we value the basic variables, keeping the transforming to obtain the maximum value of your objective function. The algorithm basically we are using for this in the linear programming in a different ways, right? But if I'm talking about the linear programming is a combination of basically two words. What we use says it as a linear programming, that's a combination of two words. And what are those words are, first word is the linear. First word is your linear. And what the first word is the linear, what does this linear define? It defines a relationship. It defines the relationship between how many? Multiple variables. What is the relationship between the different variables? Right? With how many? How we can find it? With the degree one. How much relationships are there? And the second word that is called as a programming. What does this programming indicate? It defines out the process of selecting. You have the process of selecting the best solution from various alternatives. From various alternatives. So linear programming is the method of optimizing your operations with some constraints. The main objective of the linear programming is to maximizing or minimizing your numerical values. It consists of the linear function which are subjective to the constraint in the form of a linear equation or in the terms of inequalities. Linear programming is considered as an important technique which is used to find out the optimum solution, and with this we have one important technique that the term linear programming is a combination of two words which we have discussed up. Normally, this linear programming concept is used in the mathematics and some other fields also. Like it is not possible that we can use in maths only in this concept. No, we use this concept in economics also. We use this concept in the business also. We use this concept in the telecommunication also. In manufacturing field nowadays, it is using this day by day. And how it is using, we will discuss all this in a proper way and in the next slides also. Getting in more details about the linear programming, the another words for the linear programming is also called as linear optimization. You can note all these things. Linear optimization, which may be defined as the problem of maximizing and minimizing a linear equation, but with subject to some constraints. And what these constraints can be, these constraints can be equality or inequalities, right? How this can be equalities and equalities, we will get in detail. But the main purpose of optimization problem that involves the calculation of the profit and loss. Under the linear programming problems, there are important classes of optimization problem that helps in finding the feasible regions area. We have to find out the feasible region and optimize that solution in order to solve the highest or the lowest value of your function. But how we can find out the highest and lowest value? Will the numerical will help you out. In other words, what we can say that linear programming is considered to be an optimization method. Yes, we normally use this word most of the time that in this we have to find out optimization method to what for that to maximize. Again, the first one is maximizing or to minimizing the objective function of the given model. Like we have the given set of some requirements which are to be presented in a linear relationship. And what is the main of this linear programming is to find out again the optimum solution. Yes, you can say that linear programming method is the best method for considering different inequalities related to a situation. And when we are calculating the value with the help of linear programming, the best value that is to be required, the best value which is required to be obtained in these conditions. Some of the assumptions are always being taken care of. We will be dealing with the more about this. What are the assumptions when I'm dealing in the linear programming? If I'm talking about the assumptions, then the first assumption is that number of constraints. Whenever we are talking about the constraints, should number of constraints should be expressed. Whatever the constraint we are saying over here should be expressed in what form? It should be expressed in the quantitative terms, right? All the constraints should be in the quantitative term. First assumption. The second assumption is that the relationship, whatever the relationship is there between the constraint, like I said, that labor is also required, time is also required. So whatever the relationship is required, that relationship between the constraint, two variables, and the objective function between these constraints and the objective, that should be the second point, that should be linear. The most important assumptions we are taking about. And the third most important, again the important function is the linear objective, or you can say as linear function. That is, we have some objective function and that objective is always to be considered to be optimized. We always consider this as an optimize, that we have to optimize this one, right? Now if I'm talking about the next topic, that what are the components in this. So first most important components in LLP is the variable, that is also the decision variable. So what good word is the decision variable. Not just this decision variable indicates what other constraints are there. Like decision variable, what is the quantity of the product? We have to make it clear everything. The second constraint, if I am talking about after the decision variable, is the constraints. Third one is the data, and fourth one is your objective. I'm just giving in detail objective function, that again the same point, that it represents the maximum profit and minimum cost. And the next one is your constraint, that is related to the product capacity, how much capacity is given to you and how much we can use that capacity. Right? Now, if I'm talking about the very important thing is a non-negativity. What does this non-negativity? If you want to have certain explanations, like if I'm talking about the constraints, so we will deal about more about this in the constraint. Constraints means the limitations, right? The limitation should be expressed in whatever the limitations is there, that should be expressed in a mathematical form. Okay, regarding all the resources, whatever the resources is there, so you have to record them and you have to tell them in the mathematical form only, right? So this is one of the important thing. Objective function, we always says it that it should always be in the quantitative form only. You have to express them. The third point that we have discussed is the linearity. Ma'am, what does this linearity means? What you are using this word as a linearity? What does this indicates that there should be a finite, that there should be a finite relationship, right? What this indicates that there should always be a finite and infinite. If I'm talking about finite and infinite input and output numbers is always there. In case if the function has the infinite factors, then the optimum solution will not be feasible, right? Again, the next point is the non-negative variable. Yes, the variable should always be positive. We always take it as a positive, or we can say we take it in a zero. It should be no negative. Okay, there should be no negative value in the question or in the case studies of linear programming. Now, if I'm talking about the next point, dependent variable, as we have already discussed, that the variable will decide their output. What is the ultimate solution of the problem? Or for any problem, the first step is to identify their decision variables. Right? If I'm talking about the linear programming in more detail, ma'am, if I want to go in more detail, what we came to know of, the linear programming is basically a problem that is concerned with finding out the optimum value of your linear function. And this optimum value we already discussed, it can be in the form of a maximum value as well as a minimum value. Whenever we are given a linear function, or we will consider it as an objective function. And that objective function must contain several variables which are subject to their constraints and that satisfy the level of linear inequalities, always called as a linear constraints. This linear programming problem can be used. It can be used for getting the optimum solution for your problem. Let us take an example like manufacturing problems we can take up. As we are producing two products, A and B. A product required the labor and the your machine time also. B also required same. But we have some constraint related to the machine time. That machine can be done for this much of time. Labor also being constrained that it can be used in specific period of time. Now we have the different example. Before going for the different example, I just want to share some important. This is all about the non-negative as we have discussed about. Right now, going further, if I'm talking about more about this linear programming, in the linear programming, we are using different methods. Like we can solve a problem with the help of your graphic method also, right? And we can use the most important method that is called as simplex method. Most of time this method is being used up and very much required to be worked up because the linear programming question is to be considered in a very important way. So in the next session